skill which AI should never replace.
Judgment.
In this world of AI, do you think education is still relevant?
You'll be leading agents as well as people. The multiplier of your organization is deploying agents. And we're going to be deploying hundreds of agents. That's the future. Every academic will be deploying agents. Students will deploy agents. The biggest mistake you can make is not to create a pro-AI culture. Education is transformative. It literally can transform your life and that of your family. You cannot tell a professor what. It's like a bag of cats. It's like herding cats. AI is transforming every sector, and by the time they graduate in 3 years, it's going to be totally different. So we cannot innovate fast enough because we have to prepare our students for their future.
To the Living Pod, I am Saurabh Arora, and today I've got someone in the room who I genuinely didn't expect to be sitting across on a podcast. Professor Theo Farrell is a Vice Chancellor of Trobe University. When you asked, smirkingly why I started this, I'm a pathetic listener, but by virtue of this, I believe, I'm getting better at that virtue, and it's helping my personal life, my professional life, and even individually, so I guess anyone who wants to be a good listener, probably they can spend lots of money, time, and set up these fancy things, or easier thing is probably, just shut up and listen.
And I think it's not, it's easier said than done. Because humans, we're very egocentric creatures. We have a very strong sense of ourself and our center. It's just human nature. Yeah. And so I think with a lot of people, and we all do it, we listen, but we're not actually listening.
We're not listening for listening. We're listening to answering.
And actually for like the industry we're both involved in, you providing accommodation for students, I'm head of a university, our customers, if you like. In universities, we don't tend to refer to students as customers because we don't see ourselves as businesses. But the most important thing is to listen. Listen to students. What are they telling you? What do they need? What are their fears? What are their aspirations? And I think you can't go wrong if you really listen to people, actually.
Agree. Totally agree. And love the way that you mentioned, we are in a business of education, and we can't call our student clients. And in fact, I was a panel last year where it was like, we are a student-friendly teams or university or a company. I'm like, you deal with students, your business or students. If you are claiming and celebrating that you are student-friendly, then it's given and granted, and you should be, and that's what, it calls that in this ecosystem, most of us, including me, we believe that we know it all. We know a lot, and hence we don't listen, and then we do the same mistake over and again. What are your learnings of being heading a university like Trobe? As you mentioned that communication, politics, listening is such a soft skills, but still most of us are not very good at it. How does it come natural to you? Did you work on it? Or probably you're pretending well?
No, good. No, you do have to work on these things. Actually, that's the reality of it. And also, just on this discussion about, we're in the business of education, and does that mean students are customers? And there's a way in many universities, senior leaders in universities and academics, they don't like referring to students as customers because they think it commercializes what we're doing, and there's a higher purpose. And I think that's true. There is a higher purpose. And a lot of people who go into work in universities are driven by a passion around education. And the one thing we see is education is transformative. I mean, it literally can transform your life and that of your family. But at the same time, I don't think there's a problem with also seeing students as customers, because do you know what that does? Is it gets you to listen. Like businesses listen to their customers. Because if you don't listen to your customers, you don't have a business, right?
Yeah, agree.
And I think with many universities, what happens is, universities for, I think, a
bit rigid.
Good moral reasons want to say we're not a business. And we don't want to treat students as customers. Okay, but you can still take the discipline of business and say we need to listen really carefully to meet the needs of our students, and businesses are very good at that. So in our university, and something I've done in all my leadership roles, I'm very keen on a thing called CX, which is customer experience. It's a methodology to understand, in this case, the customer journey or the student journey through their life, their time with you, in this case, a university. Where are the friction points? Where are they having a poor customer experience or a poor student experience? And then how do we make it better? So I've always in my leadership roles brought in people that will do that CX journey mapping and if you like, student experience journey mapping to improve the student experience. And I found at my time at Trobe, I've been now my third year as Vice Chancellor. It's a fabulous university. Colleagues are brilliant. They're really passionate around teaching. But they took their eye off the ball on customer experience. And that's what we've been fixing the last 2 years, actually. And we've seen a difference. So in national rankings, our student satisfaction has just leapt up in the last 2 years because we are beginning to fix things in the student experience. So we have passionate educators. We've got great courses. But some of the back office stuff, which universities are very good at administration, means that from a student experience point of view, it's not been great. And we've been fixing that in the last 2 years. So now we've got a great student experience.
You mentioned about education, you mentioned about university, right? And you're passionate about AI, which I am also, by the way. I did my AI leadership from ISB, and I guess that's the best thing happened with me in last 5 years, because the moment I did it, even on a superficial pseudo level, where I'm not a techie, or I say I'm not a technical techie, right? But the moment I did it, the adoption at UL is being traffic, because you have seen and experienced it, and that's what I will believe. All the leaders, if they continue to evolve, read, upskill themselves, not only it transforms you, it transforms the organization and the people around you, right? So we talk about AI, but before that, in this world of AI, do you think education, and this is my, I ask this question to everyone, do you think education is still relevant, and spending 50-70,000 or 50-70,000 Australian dollar or GBP is still worth spending in today's era when everything is free on YouTube? You can learn everything. There's a vibe coding only if you know how to speak, which most of us by mostly we know. Do you think it's worth it and relevant?
Yeah, no, it's good. So on the one hand, and we'll get more into this, I do strongly believe that we have to, as we're doing the Trobe, we have to move as fast as possible to integrate AI across everything we do. How we teach, what we teach has to go into curricula. Since I've been at the university the last 2 years, and my team all know, I just constantly talk about AI. And you can't shut me up when it comes to AI. And the reason is because it's to set a new climate, a culture whereby everyone knows it's good to use AI. It's not cheating, it's clever. It's clever. And people will make mistakes. That is totally cool. We learn, we move on. But the biggest mistake you can make is not to create a pro AI culture. So our university is. So when I talk to fellow vice chancellors, most of them, to be honest, a lot of them don't use AI personally. So I use AI all the time. Like every hour, I'm on using an AI app. But many of them aren't trained in AI and don't use it, so they don't understand the technology and what it can do. But in their university, staff don't know if it's okay to use AI. Students don't know if it's okay to use AI. There's no clarity around it. So in our university, our rule is the default is AI is on. So there's very particular situations where you shouldn't use AI, and we just provide clear guidance. But unless that's the case, you assume it's on. You assume people are using AI. So we created this culture whereby people talk about it all the time. So you create a culture where people are sharing hacks. What works, what doesn't. They're not trying to hide it. And interesting enough, there's an agency in Australia called the Jobs and Skills Agency, and they have talked about the problem of shadow use. So when they look at what's happening in the economy in Australia, they're finding that, basically we know that only about 40% of companies are beginning to use AI. There's 20% are really, really looking at doing it. Less than 10% are actually well in the journey. But there's, depending on the sector, 70 to 80% of staff are using AI. Right? And it's shadow use. So that's a problem. And there's tons of shadow use in universities. But not in ours. Because in ours, everyone knows using AI, that's the way to go.
It's a cool thing.
It's a cool thing.
As you mentioned, if you create a culture around it, same at UL, but I'm using it, and if there were time when people were trying to, come up with a very flowery language and absolutely perfect post and everything, I'm like, great, but do you think now it's becoming so boring that people are just skipping it? So make it, use ChatGPT's Claude, Perplexity to create a draft and then build on it. And then improve it by having different, LLMs or any other tools. And the moment then they realize that I'm very open with it, everyone like, oh, you know what, I'm using this, you know what, I've saving time this, and that's have created ripple effect at UL.
I mean, 100%. And it's also, it's a great tool to help you generate ideas,
Yeah.
test ideas from different perspectives. You can ask it to adopt the different perspectives and critique this particular plan, critique this post. Imagine you're an anxious parent, and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah,
our value
yeah,
proposition
yeah.
for this is what we're going to offer students for accommodation. Imagine you're an anxious parent. What are the concerns you would have around this? You can test your own stuff, right? Or something that we should all be doing now routinely in plans, which is that you do a pre-mortem. So we're used to post-mortems, like in the military.
Love
It's
it.
very common,
Yes.
post-mortem. Hey, here's the battle plan. Then you've got a battle and you go, oh, geez, we really lost that battle badly. Okay, what went wrong? The post-mortem. Well, of course, in business, you don't want to be
Yeah.
lost the battle and then figure out why your company's a smoldering wreck, right? You want to get ahead of the game. So you do pre-mortems. So whenever you're launching a product or a plan or whatever, you do pre-mortems.
Amazing.
Now, that's really difficult to do, but with AI, it's easy.
And it's easy, it's less cheap, it's so less cheaper, because making a mistake and then say, oh, it was a good learning,
Yeah.
trust me, it's not a great insight or a great strategy. And totally with you. In fact, I'll give you an example, and I'm curious to give this. In the morning, like last few days, I'm doing podcasts with few people, and now I'm like, and that problem is only to me, because I believe I will not able to explain, because they are not in that shoes. I'm like, while you are talking, you have mentioned something, and I'm stuck with that point, and I'm written it down. I'm like, the moment you will stop talking, I'll double click it, and but what if you're saying something which is even more interesting, and I want to continue, but I'm still sticking with my, I don't know if I'm making sense, and we can edit it or delete this, but and I mumble this and share this with all the LLMs, and then they have giving me, do this, do that, and because sharing this with someone who have not gone into that experience or into the shoe, they will not able to relate it. And if they are senior, or if they are like so-called established, they will give you some gyan or some advice which probably is very generic, so by doing this, now being curious is such a superpower, and you have all the means to get answered and then go to someone to build on it, so back to you.
And it's interesting, Sarah. I couldn't agree more on being curious is probably the greatest superpower. And, so there's a few things already in this conversation. We're hitting some really big points that every person should reflect upon to live their best lives. And one is being a listener, like an active listener, which we all have to work on. And the other is being curious and taking the time to be curious, because that is just going to expand your perspectives, will challenge you, to always, produce the best that you can. And of course, as you rightly say, large language models, Gen AI is a great tool. Now, of course, the key thing, of course, is, and that's really important, is you go beyond the first step. So you iteratively use it. Yeah. It's the iteration that's going to get you the best results. Don't just take the first thing and move on. Yeah. And use multiple different Perplexity or Gemini or Claude or whatever. Use multiple ones. But it's interesting because you asked a question earlier, which we have to circle around to, which is, so with AI and everything, YouTube as well, YouTube's brilliant, right? So with YouTube and AI and everything, you don't need to bother going to university. Why would you spend like 50 grand on that and whatever? So I think what's quite interesting is that it's still the case that you need to have structured learning to give that core, and you need to develop key skills. And interesting enough, when we talk to employers, we know employers aren't looking for people who can come in and use the latest tools. Yeah. They want people with core
context. Yes.
Yeah, they want context and core skills. So the key skills around, obviously, the analysis, communication, but critically judgment. And a lot of this, like how you use these new set of tools, this Gen AI, it's judgment. Judgment in the use is critical. And that's why also, in particular, one of the challenges humanity will face as we develop ever more powerful AI is how we ensure responsible use. Yeah. I mean, it is going to be an immense challenge, I think, for humanity. And universities have a very important role to play in educating the next generation of civic leaders and business and industry leaders who will enable us to develop responsible use of AI. The other thing also is, like in my university, 40% of what we do is health. So, like we've just launched our strategic, mid last year, we launched our new strategic plan. And one of our key goals, and that is that by 2030, we'll be the largest producer of graduates into the health workforce in Australia. And we're really driving that.
Is it? I'm so sorry. I couldn't able to stop myself here. I'm sorry. I'm still getting a better listener.
Yeah.
Is it a good positioning because healthcare is the new software engineers with the aging population? Is it coming from that? That's why you're doubling down on getting more healthcare, and because that's the future job, and probably it will be assisted well by AI, not probably replaced by AI. Hope so. Is it probably coming from that strategy?
So it's interesting, but when we look at the current skills gap in Australia, but also where there's the most jobs growth, it's in health and care. And it probably reflects an aging society, absolutely, because like many Western countries, aging society. We already have a huge skills gap, but that's growing. And I think, Saurabh, you're also correct in saying that when we look at the sectors and the industries that face the greatest potential disruption with AI, and in some cases, jobs and job roles will be augmented by AI. In some cases, job and job roles will be completely displaced. But when you're on the health and care side, it's going to be augmentation. So for instance, we do everything except for medicine. So we've got some programs that lead into medical degrees. We don't do medicine. We do everything else. So allied health, physio, OT, but also nursing and midwifery, really big. We're one of the biggest providers in Australia. And when you think about what digital technologies are doing in health, it's astronomical, right? So we've got two full professors in digital health in our university. We've got a whole series of programs around.
Tell me more about digital health.
Digital health is the application of digital technologies to transform healthcare. I'll give you an example. During COVID, big problem during COVID in Australia, where people would turn up at the emergency departments and they'd be coughing because they had COVID. The last place you want people with COVID is emergency departments. So how do you support people who have got COVID and give them health advice and stop them coming to your emergency departments? You can't stop them, but how do you reduce it? And so what the Victorian government did, and what we did, with a hospital called the Northern, is we launched, one of our chairs of digital health designed a virtual emergency department. So you can do a kind of telehealth thing, but it's online, like a Zoom call. The clinician can give you advice and then can issue a digital script to take to your pharmacy and get a prescription. So you can do everything without having to physically present yourself to an ED. And during COVID, that was great. That's continued. That is now the largest emergency department in Australia. So it's a good example of digital health, but there's many more. Wearable devices are going to transform healthcare in Australia.
All about that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about living longer, living healthier. It's about living at home, living your whole life at home, not having to go into aged care, which, I think because India has a culture of intergenerational living, that is great, right? That is really, really positive thing. Australia less so, right? So older people tend to go into aged care. It's very expensive. It's not sustainable. Yeah, it's not a great experience. Yeah. So digital technologies help all of that. So we've just launched. We launched a big program. It's called a cooperative research centre. It's a big funded program by the federal government on the care economy, the future of the care economy. So how do we get more productivity in the care economy? How do we leverage new technology, AI, digital technology? How do we train the whole workforce? It's like $100 million program over 10 years. It's got like 50 or 60 organizations involved, 5 universities. So we're both training the next generation in the health workforce, but we're doing the cutting edge research because the two go hand in hand.
I thought I would take time to get into AI, but now I'm not able to stop myself. What are those 5 AI apps which you can't operate without?
It's really good. To be honest, previously I was using a range of large language models. So Gemini, obviously, Perplexity, and ChatGPT. Yeah. One of the things that I've found, and in fact, it's now been noted, when you find a preferred, so you should ideally test using multiple. Yeah. But when you provide a preferred LLM, it develops deep knowledge about you. Yeah. Yeah. And so you get capture, right? Yeah. And so it's really interesting. So to go back to your example of, you can learn all these skills online, so you don't need to go to university, etc. Like one of those would have been prompt coding, would have been prompt engineering. And for a while that was like, everyone has to do prompt. You don't need to prompt basically anymore.
Well, they have the memory and they know the context. So
its context is key. Yeah. And of course, if you interact iteratively over time with your preferred large language model, it has excellent context. Yeah. So I am defaulting back, but I still force myself to test with others. Yeah. but I'm kind of defaulting to chat. So for me, to be honest, for us in our university, we might talk about that, but we're really rolling out. We've got a big collaboration now with OpenAI. We've got a big rollout of Chat EDU to all of our staff and students. It's the largest rollout of an AI rollout in Australia, in an Australian university, actually, that we're going to do this year. But what I want to do this year is I want to learn Agent Kit, which is their agent software. Yeah, because agentic is obviously is the future. A lot of my staff, we use Copilot as well. They're already building agents. I fully expect as a university we'll be deploying hundreds and hundreds of agents in the years to come. So one of the things you get to our level, you're probably the same as me, is I have a ton of agents around me already. They're called my team.
I'm really sorry I'm interrupting you here.
Yeah.
But this is what I tell my team, that if you need 10 people team, probably now you need 3. But those 3 you can grow 3 times because you don't need 10 people now.
Yeah, so in essence, that's correct. And so just to finish my thought, I don't actually need to learn how to produce agents, but I want to, because as a leader,
totally with you.
Because to your point, right, as a leader, you must understand the technology. But you're absolutely
totally with you.
You're actually absolutely correct, Saurabh, that the future is all of us in the organization. For everyone is going to be a leader, but you'll be leading agents as well as people.
Yeah.
And the multiplier of your organization is deploying agents.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be in the past where we would onboard a new technology. Like we want to provide support to students using a tech platform. In the past, so it's a big thing, and then you'd launch this one app in essence.
Yeah.
Now you can just build agents that are customizable, appropriate for this particular cohort, that class, this particular school, right? This discipline. And we're going to be deploying hundreds of agents. That's the future. Everyone's going to be building and deploying agents. Every academic will be deploying agents. Students will deploy agents. Students already are. Clever students are deploying agents to do their coursework, actually. And so it's a more interesting governance challenge of how do you have governance over a sea of agents that is agile enough to enable and drive innovation, but robust enough to ensure it's responsible. And it's a fascinating challenge.
Totally with you. And I believe we can relate to this, and probably we can chat off here and we can have WhatsApp discussion, because you are a professor, vice chancellor of a public university, world-class university. And that means there are lots of guardrails and lots of do and don't around you.
Yep.
As an individual, you seem to be again a very curious guy. You want to learn, you want to learn everything, so that you're not I'm assuming that you've not been told that this can't be done. And probably that is where you want to learn and implement and show that, see, this can be done. Please ensure that now this is implemented. Because for the longest time, and still I'm also struggling, but longest time, my team is, Saurabh, if you give access to your email to ChatGPT, it can hallucinate, it can spam you, there can be a cyber security, all true, we need to be very conscious, but it's also killing innovation, it's killing speed. And think from a team point of view, or someone who, like, if he knows everything and he's implementing everything, then he will challenge our present, and then not everyone, but there are set of people all across who try to discourage you. Why you're doing it? I'll do it. Not required. No, what is being shown or what you've been reading is not exactly how it is. Do you face such challenges as a head of the university?
No, it's a really good question. And obviously, and you're correct in saying, so I'm leading a large, 35,000 students. It's thousands of staff, 7 campuses. It's almost $1 billion worth of business, essentially. And so with that, but more importantly, as public institutions, we are rightly held accountable by government, who provides extensive funding for what we do. And so with that comes responsibility, no question whatsoever. And like many of our courses are accredited, there's all sorts of regulation around that. And so it's an interesting challenge of how you drive innovation in an industry that's heavily regulated with good reason.
Yeah.
But you can do it.
And a bit lazy also.
And look,
it's a bit lazy industry also.
Well, so it's interesting. So the way I would look at this is, universities are one of the oldest institutions in the world. They go back 1,000 years, right? Yeah. And they are founded on disciplines. And the key way that academic disciplines work is they work on the accretion of knowledge. So basically, slowly by degrees, you have controversies, science is challenged, and new consensus is built. And by degrees, disciplines develop, and with them scientific knowledge. And this has happened over 1,000 years. So understandably, universities might not be the most agile, fast-changing things because they're
nature of
by the nature of them. But that said, there are some universities that are perhaps more inclined that way. But the newer universities, like our university was founded in 1967, it was founded on a mission. It's explicitly founded on a mission of providing access to higher education for underserved communities. That is our core mission. To this day, that is our mission. And so there's universities like us where our North Star is, what do we need to do to prepare our students for their future? And our students, 40% of our students are the first in their family to go to university. Now, in some countries and at some times, that might not be so remarkable. But in Australia today, that's a striking figure. But it means that we're looking at our students and we go, most of our students, their families have had to sacrifice to send them here. They've had to sacrifice to come to university. So we have to prepare them to give them the best chance when they leave university. So when we talk about AI and having to innovate, that's the starting point. Well, AI is transforming every sector. And by the time they graduate in 3 years,
it's
totally different. So we cannot innovate fast enough because we have to prepare our students for their future.
But do you think then, it's also a counter from a student point of view to study in a university or a course which is structured, but we all move into a chaotic world, which we don't know when and where the next DeepSeek or the next probably universityliving.ai is coming from. Do you think then, do we really need structured learning in this chaotic era?
So firstly, there are certain disciplines where you do, because you have to have an accredited qualification to practice so that you can produce engineers that build bridges that don't fall down, or dentists that don't pull out the wrong teeth, or doctors that don't chop up the wrong arms, right? So you need to produce competent professionals in key areas that's heavily accredited, and so that's right and proper, obviously. But the other thing though is, but I think you can, at the same time, all of these professions are you now using AI. You go to the doctor now, the doctor doesn't have to take notes. The AI is taking the notes. So the doctor can focus on you, which that's already happening, right? So we have to integrate AI because we know as professionals, they will be using these tools. And one of the things in Australia, which I think may also apply in India, I mean, India has got obviously such a diversity in your economy. So you've got lots of large corporations, but many, many small businesses. In Australia, about 98% of our companies are small to medium enterprises, less than 200 employees. They can't build and deploy an AI team. They depend on the new talent coming in to help them drive an AI in their business. So if you're a university that's embedding AI across your courses and your students graduate with these skills, when these people are employing, who do you think they're going to employ? The person that comes from a course where, they've got some AI, but it's not through their course. Or the person who's coming from a course, be it an accountant, say, where inside the course, it's embedded AI, how to responsibly use it. And that's basically our vision, is to embed AI. So we are now, this year, we are sprinting in 2020. We've already been experimenting for 1.5 years in the use of AI. We've learned a lot. We've done a lot of polishing to really understand how much training we need to give to support people to adopt AI, because that's the key. You can't just give them licenses. You have to train. So we now have a very good understanding of how, and we understand the productivity uplift. We've really studied it. And what we did in December is we signed an agreement with OpenAI that will see us this year, by 2027, this year we'll acquire enough licenses to train all of our staff in Chat EDU, which is basically the 5 model. It's really powerful. And we'll do a few thousand students. We'll take whole course cohorts and we'll just train everyone to do larger scale experimentation.
Super.
And at the beginning of 2027, every single student, every single member of staff will have free EDU, which is it might even be a 5.2 model by then, which is just amazing. It's such a powerful tool.
First of all, congratulations. Secondly, let's talk about the downside of AI. Especially when it's students. It's teachers, which are a bit initially, I do understand at 40 or at 50, if someone asks me to learn coding, even if I want to, it will be hard and tough, especially when we have other workings, families, and lots of other things to do. So there's a friction, and human being mostly are not, we mostly have a friction to change. And when we are at a certain age, when we believe we know it all and now we don't need to learn, this is a new technology, it will come and go. So there are lots of friction. But let's say, even because you are head of university, and if you say this needs to be implemented, it will be implemented. What is the downside of student using AI or chat GPTs, teachers pretending or genuinely teaching and learning AI, you know, in a world when now information is commodity, everyone know everything. They might not be, they know everything, they might not know how to use it. You know, what word we are moving towards?
Yeah, there's lots in that question.
Yeah, please take your
Let's
time.
just break it down and just certainly in two bits for a start. I mean, one is, there's a very good assumption that you've made there, but I'm going to challenge it.
Please.
Which is the Vice Chancellor says, we will do this. And everyone goes, yes, we will do this. And tomorrow they wake up and they all do it. And the glorious thing about universities is that they're stuffed full of academics. And if you've worked with academics, what you know, and professors, what you know is you cannot tell a professor what to do.
They're
right?
hard to convince.
It's like a bag of cats. It's like herding cats. You can't do it because, in essence, it's like dealing with creatives, right? They are brilliant people who are confident in their knowledge and their skills, and that's what you want. You want to be taught by a brilliant
We need
person.
domain knowledge, domain experts.
And you definitely don't want to develop a culture that doesn't enable academics to feel in control of what they do and brilliant. So you have to find a different way to drive large-scale transformation in an organization. That's the key thing. So we've spent 2 years building the culture so we can drop the technology into the culture.
How did you do it? How softly you are,
Yeah, so so from day one, it's about talking about AI and how you use AI and what worked and what didn't. And literally to this day, I do a lot of town halls. I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of this kind of format. We do this 3 times a year with my staff. I always talk about AI. So now it's kind of normal.
Yeah.
And then what we did is we trained 750 staff intensively in AI.
Good point.
But what we did is talk to them about, well, what are the challenges you're facing? Tell me a bit about, what aspects of your job do you find challenging, you're not really enjoying? And we go, oh, okay, maybe we could co-design an AI solution.
Yeah.
So you look at it from their point of view by creating value for them.
Smart.
So we now have, out of our staff base, we have a big chunk of staff who are able to talk about how AI has really changed things for the better.
Because they experience it.
Yep. And so when I talk to some fellow vice chancellors who are trying to drive AI programs, some use AI, some don't. They're saying, well, we've got uneven take-up and a lot of staff are resisting, kind of what you're saying. We have the opposite problem. Our problem has been staff are saying to us, when are we going to get a Copilot license or a Chat EDU license or a Claude license? So they've been asking for the license. The licenses are very expensive. And so it's been a bit of a drag getting there. Now
Are you doing this purposely? To show them the power and then making them crave those that you don't take it for granted?
Well, it's funny you say that, right? Because whenever I'm producing plans with my team, I of course will use Chat or Gemini, one of these, to help me. It'll be Chat mostly. Give me some ideas about how I can encourage staff rollout. And one of them was, you constrain supply.
Yeah.
But no, that's not why we've done it. It is actually because of a cost issue that it was a bit of a timing thing, but also because we didn't want to sprinkle lots of licenses everywhere. We want to be very deliberate and, give people support. So the worst thing you do is you give them licenses, they use the tech, they go, it doesn't make much difference. And then they're a person walking around going, I had Copilot, didn't do anything. As opposed to, I had Copilot, oh God, I could automate my workflows, it was amazing, So I think that's really important. So we now have a culture that is really ready. It's primed for AI. We chose Chat GPT EDU because 66% of students use Chat GPT EDU. So I'm thinking from a student point of view. Now we use other tools as well, so we'll use Microsoft Copilot as well. But if we're looking at a big rollout, I want to use the tool that most students are using. So always take the student lens here, and it's a very powerful tool. But the fact is, and this goes to your other point around people being slow to. You can't. There's an expression in English you'll know is you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But the thing about these is, they're easy, right? They're it's
easier.
It's every day gets easier, right?
Yeah.
You've got companies that are worth, hundreds of billions of dollars, the big ones, and what are they trying to do? they are really focusing laser-like on how can we make this easier and easier and easier to use, right? To the point of it's so easy that
it becomes natural to you.
It just comes naturally. It's like natural. There's a reason why it's natural language. So actually, once you start getting into this, you realize, and also it means that even if we're, say, rolling out these Gen AI tools, reality is once you have the confidence, you can use any tool. Like it's very easy.
What should we do to ensure that we are not, as a universities, as a educators, we are not generating people who are like, they can't think. Like, are we or if I read it, a generation that can't think without machine.
Yeah, so that's a very fair question. So there's a whole set of risks around obviously what's happening with the AI revolution, and one of them from an education point of view would be a concern that it's going to dumb people down. I mean, already with information retrieval. So like our devices are our memories. Right? In a few years we'll all have wearable devices. Probably people who don't need spectacles. You'll be wearing spectacles, right?
In fact, I'm just like I've written somewhere that so I've given a date by 2027 December. There will be a chip in my head, which will be expandable, and I don't need my phone. I don't need my wearables. Everything will be in my eyes. Probably I'm wearing a Ray-Ban or anything.
So Mark Zuckerberg's bet is that everyone's going to be wearing Ray-Bans, right? And it may or may not be the case, but in essence, I mean, the point being that now information's at our fingertips. So already in that sense, you can say, oh, it's dumbing people down. So if you don't intentionally integrate AI in your curricula, there is a risk, right, that you're going to de-skill people, not upskill them. We are intentionally, like in our university, we are quite intentionally thinking about how we integrate the skills that our students need in an age of AI. So, for instance, in business, we now are going through a big reform of our business school curriculum, so that we embed AI across everything, and that includes Codex. So we'll integrate, which is the OpenAI's vibe coding software Codex. We're going to embed that right across our business, so every business student should know Codex, and with that they can use any coding tool. Because now if you're going to business, you should be able to do that. And likewise on our engineering side, it's interesting. So all of the engineers are coming out, the computer science students, they'll have all these skills. So what skills do they need? Because we know one of the job roles that's been very challenged, of course, is coding, right? I mean, companies are laying off coders because they don't need so many coders. So we're going to teach all of our engineering and computer science students entrepreneurship. They'll be entrepreneurial, upskilled, all of them. So we are thinking intentionally about the age we're facing, and like we're talking about AI, but the reality is there's a set of core technologies that are catalyzing each other, and we are at the cusp of a technology hype cycle in terms of change that humanity has never experienced, right? So it's AI, it's robotics, it's biotech, it's blockchain technology, it's obviously space. I mean, and it's new energy technology, battery storage, all that kind of stuff, all converging to driving a mutually reinforcing cycle of change that we've never experienced as a species.
Agree. And in fact, it's like if you say today you don't use computer, you will be seen like that's a handicap, right? Similarly, today if people are not learning AI and adopting AI, and they're still using AI to draft their grammatical mistakes or this and that, it's like you have a nuclear bomb, and you're like, from this nuclear bomb I can only drive some gas to cook food faster or cleaner, right? What is the one human skill which AI will never replace or should never replace?
Judgment. And that is the key thing, judgment. And of course, in courses, you learn judgment, which is disciplinary specific, right? So that like all the time professionals, medical professionals in whatever a medical discipline they're practicing, they could be a physiotherapist, they could be a dentist or whatever. They're applying judgment as to what is the appropriate clinical treatment for someone in that situation, because the reality is there's tons of treatments. Now, AI is going to help us there, right? So, we're going to get much more efficient at clinical treatment pathways for people, like much more efficient, because we use digital twin technology. So basically, you present and you've got this set of symptoms, and because of digital twin technology, there'll be digital twins of exactly you in the population profile on mass scale, and given the symptoms you're presenting, there will be optimized clinical treatment pathways, and the clinician could just press a button and just put you on the conveyor belt, and it would go along and give you whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, it's always going to involve clinical treatment, because the reality is
You need to have
needs
testing
judgment.
errors and
you need judgment. So I think judgment in how we use technology, when and how we use technology, in a way that's responsible, in a way that doesn't cause harm, but more importantly, causes benefits for people and for communities. And that's incredibly important. So again, producing ethical users of technology who also then have the disciplinary expertise that they can provide a better outcome for their customer, their patient, and so forth. That's a key skill.
Agree. Oh, you're in India, right? And you've been in India many a times. Latrobe is a great popular brand in India. Let's talk about India and Australia, and then how Latrobe and you've been thinking, you've been contributing to this wonderful partnership, and there are some few points which probably we can double deep about why there are caps, why students are not getting their visa or getting rejected randomly. If we can talk about that, but let's talk about India and Australia, and then Latrobe contribution to that.
Yeah, so look, I think there's a kind of enduring alignment between India and Australia. So both countries have much to offer each other. I think both governments are committed to partnership. In a world in where we're seeing the emergence of a number of very powerful big states, big players, so the United States, Russia, and China. I mean, Mark Carney, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, came out recently at Davos and said, in this world, the middle powers have to band together. Because we're contending with these very, very great powers. Now, India actually is a great power in its own right. It's such a huge country, obviously. But I think in this world whereby the Indian government can't depend on the United States, there's even more reason why the alignment with Australia makes sense. It's enduring, and that has multiple dimensions. But education is a big one. So both the Australian government and the Indian government are deeply committed to education. Our Minister of Education, Jason Clare, who's fantastic. We've got a great Minister of Education. He speaks of his federal minister opposite in India as a great friend. I've seen them interacting, and there's no doubt there's a real affection between them. And so Australia is really interested in deepening the ties with India. So for me, as in Latrobe, we have very long ties with India. So we had, we've got there's only 2 universities in Australia that teach Hindi. We're one of the 2.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've got one of the largest collections of Indian artifacts in Australia in terms of our library holdings. Our library was actually opened by Indira Gandhi. Yeah, we've long-standing ties with India. Actually, last year I made 3 visits to India, and in one of them I was visiting with a great partnership with Lady Shram College.
Amazing.
That goes back 30 years. We were celebrating the 30 years of our partnership, supporting student mobility between Delhi and Melbourne. And we have 9,000 students, international students, in our 35,000 student population. Half of those are Indian. So India for us is...
You mentioned 9,000 international and 50% Indians.
Yeah, Indian. So India for us, we've been involved in this country for decades. And it's deep in the core of what the university is about. And so, I've been building on the great work of my predecessor, who's a fantastic man, John Dewar, was the previous Vice Chancellor. The links that were built in India that he had certainly advanced. And now we have the opportunity to do some really interesting work. I'll tell you what I've really been impressed with in India is the vibrancy of the innovation ecosystem. It just blows my socks off. I mean, it really does. And, in particular, every time I come to India, I always go to, obviously, Delhi, but Bengaluru. And we're just back and forth to Bengaluru. It's the heart of India tech, particularly biotech.
Do you regret not being techie?
I beg your pardon?
Do you regret not being a techie?
So I'm not a techie, but
do you regret not being a techie?
Oh, do I regret not being a techie? Well, it's interesting because what I will say in my research, aside from Afghanistan and as an academic, my area of specialty is how military organizations innovate. So it's about technological innovation. And the headline is, it's not about tech, it's about culture. It always comes back to culture.
Super.
And that's the approach we've taken in AI. But anyway,
you're talking a lot about like Simon, I'm not getting the full name, there's Simon guy who is an author and he's also with US military, and Simon he have written a couple of very good books.
Yes.
He's a great speaker and TEDx, and I'm not getting his name, probably I recall.
Okay.
Simon.
Oh, I have seen him. He's a good speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is good actually.
Because you are reminding me of him.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Thank you. That's a compliment. I'll take that. But look, so for instance, last year we launched a bioinnovation corridor that goes from Melbourne to Bengaluru, and so it's anchored on our campus in our innovation precinct in our North Melbourne campus, and the Bangalore Bioinnovation Centre, which is led by this really visionary, fantastic leader, Dr. Mohammed Adil. And when I was thinking about Melbourne is one of the great biotech centres in the world. The Victorian government is very proud of this fact. It's built it over a good 20 years of investment. And they say when you think about biotech centres of the world, you think about Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? So MIT, Harvard, and all the big research institutes, the Golden Triangle around London, and Melbourne. Now, I would add Bengaluru, because Bengaluru
Your campus coming in Bangalore, right?
So we are developing. Yeah, we are developing.
Your TNE campus is coming in Bangalore.
Yeah, so we're developing our footprint in Bengaluru, and in particular right now, currently the plan is to proceed to a campus, but right now the focus actually is on this bioinnovation corridor. So we deliver our global accelerator program in partnership with BBC, and it also has in-country immersion. So, like this year, we supported 11 startups, and a bunch of other startups, and we brought 4 startups to then spend time with us in our innovation precinct in North Melbourne. And so,
and what streams we are encouraging and entertaining? What are these streams like within technology?
so this one's particularly
More health.
biotech. It can be ag and food as well, of course. So in terms of our big research strengths, as a university, ag and food is one of our ag tech and food tech is one of our really big strengths, because we're the home of AgVic, which is the Victorian government's R&D facility. So it's hundreds of researchers. But we also have a thing called the Trobe Institute for Molecular Sciences, which again it's a crazy looking building. Like it looks like something out of Star Trek, just plunked down on our campus. If ever you're on a video call with one of us, we'll have this thing as our backdrop because it looks so mad. You definitely want to have it there. But it's got a chock-a-block of hundreds of researchers and laboratories working on molecular sciences. So, biotech is one of our big things, and then digital and AI is the other area.
You mentioned student mobility, right? And the great partnership with LSR and La Trobe and all these universities, and you have a immersion program, you have twinning, and now TNE coming in India. So 2 questions. First, what's your view on student mobility? And it's coming from a university living founder, business opportunity mindset, wherein lots of universities have lots of MUs. Every university have lots of MUs, but because we do B2I, business institution, and we work with IIT, lots of BITS planning, in fact, and their exchange program. When they go, most of them struggle with accommodation.
Yep.
They struggle with even post admission support. How do you see that? And this is coming from my curiosity to how I get some business out of it, if I'll be very honest. And also, with if we have 50% international students, Indian students, which are very price sensitive, what's your view on student accommodation? Because again, when I did that report for Australia, which Australia launched, so thought was same, that every university comes and say that they are doing great, they have so many international students, they have, but most of them have 1,000 to 2,000 beds on campus, because they are 54, 50, probably now 60,000 public, like I would say, on-campus accommodation. Even with scapes and all the organized accommodation, there's another 100,000 students, 100,000 beds. In a country with 1.5 million overall students, with 450 or 400,000 international students, there are only 150 or 200 organized on-campus, off-campus accommodation. And because I struggled, I started my second inning university living with Australia as a destination. The kind of time, money, efforts I put in Australia versus other countries, the rate of growth is not equivalent to what I have probably experienced in UK or in Ireland for that matter. Why is that?
Yeah, so good. And I think it's interesting. So on the one hand, because I think earlier you were talking a bit about the visa challenge, which is now smoothing out. So I think, I think what we're going to see this year is much better management of the whole visa issue by the Australian government. But partly what happened was we got caught in an election cycle, and there is a shortage of housing in Australia overall, and international students were seen as contributing to that problem, and hence the government was constraining international students. But interesting enough, particularly what it did was it did it at the lower end of the sector, so not universities, but non-university providers. And so it has cut visas there, but actually has preserved the number and is growing the number of visas it's going to award to international students. But when you look into it, when you actually look at the data, what you see actually is that there's a certain segment of the market which are professionals and families, and their, apartments and houses are very, very expensive, like here in Delhi, hugely expensive. And because the demand is tight, it's driving up price.
Yeah.
And that's problematic politically in an election cycle. Yeah. When you look at the end of the students, the kind of accommodation students want.
Yeah.
So it depends on where, but like in Sydney, some parts of Sydney, there is actually
very expensive.
There's an issue, right?
Yeah.
And some universities get caught up in that because they're in parts of Sydney where actually, international students are actually taking up some of the rental stock that would be used by professionals. Yeah. That's an issue. Yeah. Melbourne's different. Yeah. Melbourne has a surplus actually of affordable accommodation. So it just happens to be a state which has built tons of apartments. And so, for instance, when I look at our campus, because there's a fair point, as in, unlike in Britain where you'd have a higher proportion of accommodation beds per student, in Australia you don't tend to have that, right? Yeah. Because most Australian students live at home. So that's just the way it works. But so like we have 35,000 students across our 7 campuses. Of those 35,000, roughly about 85% would be in our main campus in North Melbourne and Bundoora. We've got 9,000 international students. That campus has about 2,200 beds, but we actually know we've surplus capacity. So in any year, we only fill about 85% of those beds, maybe 90% at the out. We always have a bit of spare capacity, and in particular, we have different price points. So obviously, as you go from the older accommodation stock to the newer stock, like the newer stock. By the way, I went to see our newer stock. It's called NASA North and South Tower. But it's 2 really funky buildings. It's got hundreds of beds. I was like, holy cow, this is like 5-star accommodation. Yeah. I just couldn't believe it. It was like the whole, it's like hotel quality, amazing accommodation. But of course, that's going to be more expensive because the more expensive end. Yeah. But then as you go down, there's we've got a series of colleges, and as you go to the older stock, it's cheaper. But even like the cheaper end, that's the kind of accommodation I would have been in as a student. Yeah. That I totally recognize that. Yeah. And we tend to find with international students in particular that they will go for the more affordable accommodation. But we have surplus accommodation. Now, there was one campus where we could foresee in the future that we're going to run out of accommodation, and that's in Bendigo. So our largest regional campus is in a beautiful city called Bendigo. It's about a 45-minute drive outside of Melbourne. We've built there one of the largest dental and oral health schools in Australia. So like we can take hundreds of students, and it's one of the most in-demand courses. But we could foresee that we would be a couple of hundred beds short, and so we're building a new accommodation in the CBD that will fit that. So there are a number of universities that are very responsible. They can, if they see there's going to be a problem, they will plan ahead. Yeah. But generally, if you're a student coming to Melbourne, you're not going to find a problem getting accommodation because there's tons of accommodation in Melbourne.
I don't know. I mean, again, off or weekend, but the maths is still not matching to me. 35,000 students, 9,000 international, out of which 4,500 are Indians, and the biggest campus accommodation you have is 2,200, and then you have second year, third year students, or let's say if all cumulative, but still, like the overall beds on campus is how many? Or how much?
So the overall beds on our North Campus is 2,200.
Yeah, and you have 9,000 international students.
Yeah, and it is really interesting, right? But look, it could be, and I'm spitballing here, but it could be that many of the students might have jobs not in North Melbourne, but might have jobs, say, close to the CBD. So it could be that they are choosing to live closer to where they work, and then they come onto campus for courses. We pride ourselves on a thing called StudyFlex, where we do hybrid learning, right? So it's one of the flagship aspects of our education is a thing we call StudyFlex. So we give people the ability to have more control over when and how they take classes. And we find a lot of students do a mix of in-person and some online, so they can have a bit more flexibility because like almost every student these days works now.
The student tend to abuse these study facts, especially there are lots of students from this part of the world who go for immigration with a mindset. Do you think
No.
no?
So no,
What are the checks and balances you have for that?
Yeah, so we, as you would expect, we monitor very closely student progression. We've got all the data. And like now it's quite common in universities. So for instance, one of the things we do is we do predictive analytics. So we know when students are disengaging a bit or might be struggling with their courses, and we proactively lean in and provide support. That's, for universities like us, there's a number of them. We've been doing this for years. So we have a very good handle on student progression. And look, it's about giving people some control over their lives. They're adults, obviously.
Yeah, they're adults. Yeah, makes sense.
Look, they want to graduate with a good degree to get onto their career, but they just need to earn some money at the same time. And so what we do at StudyFlex is give them that opportunity. And we find that's very popular with our students.
Is this something new which you introduced, or it was been previously?
No, so that was introduced previously. That we've been doing that for quite a few years. It's really
progressive.
It's a real flagship.
I didn't know that. So.
Yeah, it's a real flagship aspect. So it could be that many of our students actually, like when you go, like we're in North Melbourne up here, but actually between us and the CBD, there's a series of areas which are, parts of Carlton, Brunswick, parts fabulous, very cool parts of Melbourne, like really rich cultural, lots of cafes, shops, and lots of students live in that area. It's the vibe is cool,
very vibrant,
but there's also good job opportunities there. So I expect that's what we're seeing.
I don't know if it is the right platform, but I mean I struggle to understand Sydney or New South Wales way of working and Victorian way of working. There's too many regulations in Melbourne. You are saying that there are lots of accommodation or lots of beds, but students are struggling to get accommodation at their price point.
Yeah.
And this is where probably I'm also, that's how we got research, and that's why I'm doing lots of things with Australia and universities and whatnot, wherein I'm not saying that there's no accommodation, but probably the demand and supply, there's an imbalance, or people are not aware of it, and people reach out. I mean, I got into this way. I reached to NTU without my accommodation and stayed in a hotel for 4.5 months, and that's how I got into this. And I still come across so many students who don't book their accommodation because they wait for the visa, and when they go, most of the accommodation got filled, all the prices go up, and then they look for a shady accommodation, anything. Is it the fact, or is it my business sense trying to convince me?
No, look, and Sarup, and you may have closer data than I do, obviously, on some of this. And of course, across a population of 9,000 students, you're always going to have some students that will have some challenging situations. Like broadly speaking, we really encourage students to plan in advance. We really encourage them to apply for visas well in advance. And like our university, so we're quite proud of the fact that we have one of the highest visa acceptance rates in Australia, because we put a lot of work.
What is the secret sauce?
Sorry?
What is the secret sauce of having the highest?
Yeah, the secret sauce is that we a few years ago built a large team in Delhi, and we support the applications. We process and support the applications in Delhi. So before they're presented to the Department of Home Affairs, we have vetted everything.
Okay.
So we won't allow someone to apply for a visa unless we think that the risk of that it won't get through is very low. So we've got a large office in Delhi.
Yeah.
Like we've got 50 people doing that.
Under Amit.
We're one. You know Amit, right?
Yeah.
And we're one of the few universities that has such a large, because India is critical for us, and so we want our ensure.
Why so India is critical?
Because we've long-standing links,
and it's still in level 3, and so much of rejection. Probably not for that, but for Australia and randomness.
Well, I'll tell you what was interesting was it was level 3 for a long time, and then it dropped down level 2, and then it went back to 3.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of seesawing, but I think the Australian government wants to get it back to, and I think what happened was a number of universities who aren't used to working in India but usually recruit from China, that they've seen a bit of decline in China because of demographic trends, and they moved into the Indian market, and they didn't have strong integrity controls, and that caused a response where the government's going, okay, obviously we need to have a bit more focus. All it is just a bit more focus. But provided that applicants have all their paperwork sorted and the strong support from the university, you won't have a problem. You just need to apply in advance. and then you can plan everything. But the one thing I will say is there is a cost of living issue. That's one of the reasons why we offer so many scholarships, because so our university is all about, it's our founding mission, giving access to higher education to people who will otherwise might find barriers to going to university. So we've got a series of, obviously, the prestigious Vice Chancellor scholarships, which are the full scholarships. We've got a Shah Rukh Khan PhD scholarship for female PhD students, which is one of our flagship scholarships. We're very grateful to Shah Rukh Khan for graciously allowing us to name a scholarship after him. But also we give a large number of scholarships to students to help reduce that financial barrier, particularly South Asian scholarship scheme. So we're all about helping students have that path to success. And if we don't think that you have got the paperwork in order or your visa will be accepted, then we wouldn't support you to go forward. And that's why we have one of the highest, really the highest visa acceptance rates in the sector. We want our students to succeed.
Superb. What if Australia government, what do you see 2026 panning out for global mobility and especially in Australia destination and overall international students?
Look, I think on the one hand, I think this visa issue will stabilize. The Australian government, there's no question the Australian government is really committed to that partnership with India and it wants to see that succeed. So I think this thing will stabilize. And I'm really quite confident in that. But the other trend is going to be Australian and British and North American universities beginning to establish campuses. And there's a large number already doing that. And that's something that's been encouraged both by... So I think 26 is going to be... We're going to begin to see all these campuses launched, and it's going to be an exciting time, actually.
I've still have so many questions, but last two, or probably three. You talk about TNE,
Yep.
right? You talk about Bangalore, right? Because I'm being, I won't say I'm like suggesting, but I'm definitely in discussion with lots of universities who have faced accommodation problem across, and they don't want to, including Dubai, they don't want to repeat that in India. Due to virtue of that, I understand the TNE a bit, but what is the vision of TNE? Is it a marketing gimmick? Is it a hedge for university, or is it what is it like TNE versus international student? Because on the face of it, lots of media have been talking that now going abroad has become expensive, the cost of living have gone up, accommodation an issue, employability an issue. So now Indian students and parents are already fascinated by international degrees. Now they are trying to sell their degrees in India.
So I think different universities and different university leaders might have different views on this. Certainly my view and the view of our Chancellor, so like I have a boss above me, who's the Chancellor of our university. He's a man called John Brumby. He was the former Premier of Victoria. And he's someone who, by the way, deeply understands tech. John Brumby, he is the architect of the tech ecosystem in Victoria, from his premiership. They had the foundations for which his predecessors then took forward for the building of this great biotech and medtech ecosystem. But I know from going on visits to India and particularly to Bengaluru with him, he, like me, is struck by the vibrancy. Obviously, it's partly driven by a very youthful country, which brings a vibrancy of its own, but in particular of the higher education and innovation ecosystem here. But he's a man who's deeply driven by, he's passionate around the ability of education to transform people. So he started out as a school teacher and ended up as Premier of Victoria, and now he's our Chancellor. So at his heart, he strongly believes, as I think many people in university, in the university sector believe, that the most important thing to address inequality in our society is education.
Education, totally with you.
And so, he's passionate about the founding mission of our university to provide access to higher education for underserved communities, which we do with our regional campuses, and we're now doing in parts of Melbourne where we're seeing particularly migrant communities establishing and bring with them a passion for education. So when he comes to India and he can see, here's an Indian government saying to foreign universities, can you come and help us and work with Indian partners as we develop together the higher education system, the education needs of this young country. This is, for him, it's totally aligned with his beliefs and our university mission. So that's what's behind this. I'm also interested in how we can grab great ideas and energies around innovation and bring it back. But I see here an opportunity for us to continue our university's mission. And I know from speaking to some fellow vice chancellors, who have very similar missions. There's a number of universities like us that's what's driving them too.
You were at top of your field, the war strategist, the book, which was again predict so much correctly, advising governments, NATO. I have another full podcast I can do. What's your take on NATO, especially now? So we will not get into there. And then you walk away and become and chose to be an educator and become a head of the university. Why and like
Yeah, it's a fair question. So I was for a decade a professor of war studies in the Department of War Studies at King's, and which is a unique department, and it's the premier department in the world for the study of armed conflict, and with that came all sorts of opportunities to advise governments and senior military and so forth, and do interesting things with government. And it was a brilliant opportunity to do research and whatnot. And I learned a lot that actually applies to being a university, like strategy. I used to do the masterclass in strategy, and guess what? Being a university leader, a lot of it's about strategy. Learned a lot about leadership. A lot of it's listening, actually, and communication. So a set of skills that I think helped with leadership. But there are many academics who are brilliant in their field, who choose to become leaders. Many academics will take on leadership roles, heads of laboratories, heads of department, and then they might still go back and focus on their research. But I think for a number of people who are academic leaders, many who are brilliant in their respective fields, I think they find leadership very satisfying. I think they feel like they're having a really positive benefit, and they continue on this leadership track. And that's essentially my story. And it is a privilege to lead a university, because you are leading a community of brilliant people, of inquiring minds, and in particular, the next generation. So, you're custodians of the next generation of people that will go in and have a positive impact in their society and business and industry. So it's truly a privilege to do that. I'm very fortunate, though, that I get the opportunity to come to places like, obviously in India, meet so many interesting people, and yourself, Saurabh, and these are conversations I wouldn't have otherwise. And so that it feeds curiosity, which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. The last one. What do you want your legacy to be? You love to be known as the most AI friendly VC, or the war strategy VC, or something else?
Look, I think, so firstly, be a bit careful around legacy, because it's not about me, is the truth of it. If I think about the two major changes I do want to try and take forward, one is to take forward AI, embedding AI. So not just, for me, if we take delivery of 40,000+ chat GPT EDU licenses, and we don't do a lot more with them, that's a big failure.
Yeah.
And I don't mind failure. That's, if you're failing, you're innovating.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty big failure. Yeah. So I'm really interested in how we embed and really make a difference for our students. And so, I want La Trobe to be, it's already a leading AI university, but to be a global exemplar. And we're just large enough. Like, the really big universities are incredibly hard to achieve university-wide transformation, because they're in effect lots of different principalities, because the faculties are so powerful. But we're a university that's large, but not so large that we can't have a university-wide collective effort. Yeah. And so I think, I'm confident we're going to do some great things. But the other is, I'm really excited about the opportunities for us to do more in India. Like, there's many other countries that we're obviously operating in, and we have great partnerships. They all bring a lot. But I think the opportunities to do really have positive impact in India, and to learn, and to learn from our collaborators in India and bring back those lessons and change ourselves. That's what really excites me, actually.
Thank you so much. I really don't want to let you go, but it's all my pleasure, and I genuinely mean it.
Yes.
And probably, I would love to have another shot at it whenever next time. Probably be in touch. On that note, thank you so much.